Unleash the Mad Butchers of Khorne, because it's now officially confirmed that the World Eaters Legion will be getting its own codex in Warhammer 40k. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where now we have the second new faction to be officially confirmed to be added to the game within the space of 1 year. Just over a month back, it was announced that the Leagues of Votan will be adding the squats back into 40k, and are now one of the ones that's been kind of predicted for a while. Another Chaos Legion is rising to prominence, and it looks like they're going to be getting a similar sort of treatment to the Death Guard and the Thousand Sons. Out of the two, we had the option of the Emperor's Children, Fulgrim and Slanesh, or the World Eaters Angron and Khorne. It's kind of interesting that out of the two, on a channel poll I did about a year or so back, it was the Emperor's Children that very slightly won out over the Angry World Eater boys, but the two were kind of similar in popularity. From what Games Workshop have said, it sounds like the Codex still isn't going to be out for a good long time yet, but I think by the nature of their releases, they sort of have to announce it at this point, because it sounds like the standard Chaos Space Marine Codex isn't too far around the corner, and that book isn't going to include any rules for the World Eaters, who are shortly going to be getting their own codex later in the year. Rather than wait for us to find that out when the codex drops, and have World Eaters basically have it as confirmed but not officially announced, they've decided to bite the bullet early and tell us all that it's coming sometime later. The actual details that we've got for the codex so far are slightly scanty, though to be honest, just on the pattern of what things have come before, you can kind of fill in really quite a lot of gaps. I think in reality we've got a very good idea of what the World Eaters release will look like. The release does fit in well with the previous rumours that we've had. The big rumour had them as an upcoming project, and the rumours from the new Chaos Space Marine Codex have been proved right once more. So it does really sound like we're not going to get Khorne Berserker rules in the main codex, they're going to be saved till later. That does mean that they're going to need something to bridge the gap. It's kind of unreasonable to ask Khorne players to shelf their Berserkers until the Codex comes out. I'm sure the World Eaters players will be very angry about that. Instead, apparently they're going to have some get you by type rules in a White Dwarf supplement, which I'm going to guess will have a basic Legion trait, probably a data sheet for the Khorne Berserkers and Khan the Betrayer, and hopefully a few other simple special rules to at least keep them playable until their actual Codex comes out. I feel like those White Dwarf rules are going to be the first teaser of what's going to come with the World Eaters. I suspect, like those indexes that they had at the start of 9th edition for things like Dark Angels, they probably will have a fair bunch of the new rules and stat lines there, and then the full Codex will flesh out with a whole ton of other options. It seems at least fairly likely to me that Khorne Berserkers will be getting their 2 wounds, and maybe some other stat line improvements besides. Otherwise, they have let slip a few more details. First up, they've got this new artwork, presumably from the Codex. As best I can tell, it looks like the World Eaters are cutting down orcs and tyranids alike. I wonder if one of their warbands has got itself engaged in the Octaria sector and is putting a whole load of Xenos to the sword. Also, in their lore reveal video, they did talk about splinter bands of World Eaters roaming the galaxy, each one led by a powerful warlord. I have a feeling that that's going to be fairly similar to the Death Guard's 7 Plague Companies and the Thousand Sons' 9 Great Cults. I feel like there's almost no doubt that we're going to have 8 Khornate World Eaters warbands to choose from, each of which I'm sure will have their own subtle and nuanced ways of smashing people's face in with a massive great chain axe. Speaking of which, in an unintentional segue, these are the only bits that we're actually going to get to see of new models in this preview. A whole bunch of fun World Eaters chain axes, a couple of them look pretty massive, and I do wonder whether they might be something like heavy chain axes, the ones that the Chaos Space Marine Legionaries can now carry into battle. I think we can broadly guess the type of miniatures that will be coming for the release, but the only one that they absolutely 100% confirmed is that they'll be getting new Khorne Berserkers, something that you could absolutely rely on anyway if the World Eaters did get a codex. Those guys and the Noise Marines certainly have been fighting the long war for real, and now with all the updated models really stand out from even the current Chaos Space Marine range, which previously had a whole load of old stuff in it. Otherwise, besides our long overdue Khorne Berserkers, just by taking a very quick glance at the Death Guard or the Thousand Sons roster, you can pretty much 100% predict that at least a few other choices will be coming. There is absolutely no way that they would release a Codex World Eaters without giving us another Demon Primarch, and it seems pretty certain that Angron will be returning to the field. So far, out of any of the models that Games Workshop have released, I think Magnus and Mortarion are some of the best-selling Games Workshop miniatures of all time. I've got no doubt that the reincarnation of Angron will be something monstrous, and when they do release their Demon Primarch sculpts, they do tend to draw pretty heavily on the artwork and ideas that have come before them. Magnus and Mortarion did certainly have precedence, but there's actually a fair bit of artwork in Warhammer 40k for Angron himself, so it seems likely that it will look pretty similar to the demonic renditions on the right. I'm sure we'll have a fair few nods to his Horus Heresy form, the one on the left, and the version of that that's been rendered in the artwork for one of his books, but it seems pretty likely that he's going to be some sort of monstrous bloodthirster-like thing in power armor. I'd guess that he'd probably keep the wings, and I honestly dread to think what sort of melee stats he's going to have in game. It'd kind of be going against the law if he was anything but one of the very best combatants in all of 40k. Just for fun as well, the little red demon in the middle is the version of Angron in epic form, maybe not looking quite as ferocious as the other versions of Angron around him. Otherwise though, going back to other likely things, perhaps the most interesting other releases besides the core troops for the Death Guard and the Thousand Sons were the Terminators, so I think we can certainly expect some Red Butchers on the table. If those previous two codexes precedents are enough, then they're likely to be the thing that you can layer the most buffs on, hopefully be horribly hard to shift, and do an enormous amount of damage as they carve through the enemy's elites. The Thousand Sons got their Zangors and the Death Guard got their Poxwalkers, so some sort of unique Cornate cultists are likely. In terms of what I'd like to see, I'd be far more interested to see some normal humans a bit more dedicated to Khorne than any sort of weird Khorne beast men, but I have a feeling some sort of Khorne Gors might be the way that they go. I think Zangors certainly have had some mixed reception in Thousand Sons. A lot of people like them, but I still find it kind of hard not to see them as Age of Sigmar models that they've just ported over to 40k. Otherwise, we'll get some nice Khorne Lords of some sort, maybe a Terminator one, maybe not, and I feel there's a pretty good chance of some Death Guard-like support characters as well. Seeing as Khorne can't get psychic powers, I very strongly predict that we'll get a Chaplain-like World Eater, one with a table full of litany equivalents, of no doubt many of which will get you to tear your foes apart in new and unforeseen ways. Finally, as with the Death Guard, I'm sure we'll get at least one Khornate Demon engine. The Death Guard locked out with 3, but I guess they were the launch faction for 8th edition, so at least the initial drop for World Eaters might not be quite as generous. I think a demon engine of Khorne will be very cool indeed. There's a fair bit of precedent for them in Forge World things, something between a Blood Slaughterer, Brass Scorpion, or maybe a Chaos Decimator like thing. I think all of those could fit in very nicely for Khorne. On the flip side though, it might not be all great news for the World Eaters. I would bear in mind that the Death Guard and the Thousand Sons do have some fairly limited rosters. When the Death Guard got their own codex, they did lose access to options like Havocs. If you do have Chaos Chosen, Mutilators, or even standard Chaos Legionaries that are painted up as World Eaters, I don't think it's guaranteed that you're going to be able to field them as such. In the preview, they did seem a little bit sketchy as to whether or not the Thousand Sons and the Death Guard would get those accursed cultists as well, so I don't think that that's guaranteed either for the World Eaters. Could be a bit annoying for established collectors, though I feel for most people getting a whole ton of plastic kits wash in, plus their Primarch made plastic and massive, is probably going to outweigh that. So as always, I look forward to hearing what you have to say about the news. Let me know what you think of the incoming World Eaters down in the comments below. It's going to be a fairly busy year with not one but 2 new factions added to the game. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly talk about any other news of the World Eaters that we get on the channel, and I look forward to reviewing the book in all its blood-soaked glory once we eventually get it. Finally, if you've been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to briefly mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. The channel's Patreon is how I can afford to keep on making so many videos quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying quite a bit, then any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.